Hello, everyone, and welcome to TableTakes, brought to you by Gen Con. My name is Christian Doyle, and I am joined today by Tifa, Mike, and Emma, and we're here to talk about games. So what are we talking about today? Well, actually, before we get started, this is our first show, which I am very, very excited about. I hope you're all excited, too. But I know nothing about any of you. So if you would... You don't know me, I don't know you. I'd like to say hello a little bit. So Tifa, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
So I'm Tifa Robles. I've been in the gaming industry in some capacity for over a decade now. I've worked at Wizards of the Coast, GTS Distribution. I was the founder of Lady Planeswalker Society. Now I'm a freelance writer. I write for tabletopdesk.com about all sorts of board game related stuff. And I'm working on a novel. Yeah, nice.
All right.
Hi, I'm Mike Robles. I have also been in the game industry for quite some time, be it video and or board. I was the community manager at Wizards of the Coast for Magic the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons. Also at Microsoft for a long time as the community manager for Killer Instinct, Minecraft, and a bunch of other cool games. I do streaming part-time. I host a show on Twitch, as well as this news show, which I'm very excited about. You can usually find me somewhere on the internet doing something silly.
Sweet. My name is Emma Larkins. I didn't realize we had to do years. I have to do my math now. I think 5 years in the gaming industry. Kind of bounced around a lot. I was community manager for Playcrafting in New York City, which is an organization of independent game developers. Worked for the classiest pool joint in New York City, so that's kind of games related. More recently, I work at Mox Boarding House, which is a super cool board game store here in Seattle. Get a lot of in touch with the board game community. I'm also a board game designer, most recently released And Then We Died, a cooperative storytelling game where you play as ghosts trying to figure out how you died so you can pass on to the other side.
Wow, you all have such impressive resumes. I almost feel embarrassed saying what I do now. My name is Christian Doyle. I'm an actor, director, filmmaker. I associated with the games industry, although not directly. I don't make games, but I make shows about games and movies about games. Perhaps you have seen some of them. I looked younger in all of them. So what are we talking about today?
Oh my gosh, we have a lot to cover. So here's the thing, folks, is we're going to try to cover as much as we can. We've got our notes here that Emma has printed out. Thank you, Emma, for
really well done.
Responsible one.
It's like bringing an apple to the teacher on the first day.
Yeah.
Way too
so I think the first thing we want to talk about is the FFG, the Organized Play for 2019. They announced their plans for 2019.
And that's FFG, that's Fantasy Flight Games.
Thank you, Fantasy Flight Games. I keep forgetting. My assumption is that everyone in Gen Con, everyone that's watching already knows all of this stuff.
I am here to be your uneducated.
The man on the streets.
That's right. That's right. You're every man.
And they've
every human.
Every human. That seems close.
Yeah. Every person.
Yeah.
And they've announced a ton. Like I'm looking at this list of all of their world championships that they want to do. There's a lot. All right, starting in March with Adepticon, they're going to have Star Wars Armada and Star Wars Imperial Assault. All right, and then in June, at the Fantasy Flight Games at their headquarters, Star Wars Legion. All right, so that's a good start. But then we get to Q4.
That's where it's really exciting.
And this is where we have X-Wing, Star Wars Destiny, Game of Thrones, and Legend of the Five Rings. But the most interesting one here
is Legend of the Five Rings.
Right, yeah. This is the one I hadn't mentioned. For KeyForge, they're calling it KeyForge Celebration.
They're making a party out of their organized
They're doing a party, and
it'll be for their 1 year anniversary.
Right.
Yes,
which makes sense.
And then then World Championships in 2020. So let's talk about what do we think about these?
I think Fantasy Flight Games makes far too many games.
They are a very established company.
I mean, every Star Wars, right?
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
mean, they've got the Star Wars license, so pretty much anything games related that comes out Star Wars that isn't a video game is Fantasy Flight.
Yeah.
Legend of the Five Rings, which obviously long shelf life. It looks like they're bringing over a lot of older properties that have maybe fallen off from their publishing companies and picked them back up and given them new life, which is one thing I've really liked about them.
I mean, I think the thing, not just the quantity of games, but the depth of them. Because, I mean, there's a lot of companies that release a lot of games every year, but these aren't just like, oh, it's a lot of games. These are games that people are doing at a serious competitive tournament level, which is the amount of time that people dedicate to these things at Mox, like
Well, I mean-
every week, coming into practice.
Yeah, I think like games like L5R almost demand that really high-level organized play anyway. Whereas I don't really play a lot of card games or board games so much as a lot of tabletop role-playing games, and they make a lot of them.
Yeah.
TV.
Well, so Fantasy Flight is owned by Asmodee, which is known for absorbing lots of companies and having a very diverse set of games. So I mean, I think they fit in really well with that company. And organized play in general, I think, is so important and crucial to the tabletop industry.
Yes.
So it's really nice to see them embracing that. And like I think they're going even stronger this year than they have before.
Yeah.
And I also like that they're taking some time to sort of learn KeyForge and the
Yes.
community before jumping into like a world championship.
Well, what I find what's interesting is not only do they have so many games, but I like that they're focusing on world championships. These world championships, of course, are going to be invite only, but they're focusing on the different styles. Star Wars Destiny, of course, being the dice rolling game,
Yeah.
right? And then you have your miniatures, and then you have
Yeah.
KeyForge, and so there's a lot of different. It's almost weird. They're sort of like, welcome all gamers. All gamers, come to us.
I
Come,
don't care
let
what
us
kind of
house
games you play,
Yeah.
please
Yeah.
join us.
Let us house you into this.
Well, I think a really important thing for Fantasy Flight is the way that they engender trust with their communities. So some feedback I've heard from a lot of people in the competitive gameplay space is that, Fantasy Flight is always there. They don't just release their game out into the wild and people are coming back from tournaments being like, oh, this didn't work, like this was unbalanced, this wasn't fair. And they're like, oh, whatever, you're on your own. They're there every step of the way. Even for the old Netrunner tournaments,
Oh,
I've
yeah.
heard a lot about
Oh,
how
yeah,
they
yeah.
would, certain cards, you can only have so many, have points for the cards in your deck, so that it was,
Yeah.
they want these to be competitive, and to keep something competitive, especially if you're releasing product on a regular basis, it takes a lot of rebalancing, and that's harder in a physical game as opposed to a digital game.
Right. What do we think about this KeyForge celebration, Tifa? I know you said it's a big party. They're using their first year to sort of weed stuff out.
I think they're being really smart about it. I think the celebration party, it's like, they've had a year of experience. Let's be hype about that. Let's celebrate it. Let's, bring the community together and then move forward from there to figure out all right, now that we have an established community, let's really bring in the competition aspect of it, which I think is the right way to go about that.
And they're really feeling out the different formats. So right now it launched with many different competitive formats. So there's everything from sealed, where you crack open a fresh deck, to bring your worst deck, to bring your best deck, to kind of this switching thing where you play your deck and play your opponent's deck, and that they're still figuring out the chain system for balancing powerful decks.
There might be people watching who aren't familiar with KeyForge. Maybe we should actually
That's a
Yeah.
good. You know what? That's an
Explain the
excellent
game a little.
segue.
KeyForge.
Do we, Emma? You brought visual aids, did you not?
Oh my gosh, should I break it out here?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
you might as well.
Might as well.
Should I guess I'll start with my.
Let's go ahead. Let's
So,
bust this out.
To
We're
start
talking
out,
about-
while Emma gets ready to play show and tell, KeyForge is a brand new style of game. It's unlike any other game that's been made.
unique.
It's unique.
Unique is the
Although
is
it
the
doesn't
word.
look like that at first glance.
Right,
It looks
yeah.
just like a standard collectible card or trading card game.
Right. It's designed by Richard Garfield. What's so unique about this is that each deck is completely different. Every single deck is unique. No deck is the same, and you will never, open or play against the same deck again.
Yeah, Emma, tell us how we play KeyForge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, KeyForge. It's
Oh, this sounds like it's going to be complicated.
it's not actually. I think one of the most fascinating things about KeyForge is you can do the actions of the game even if you know nothing about it. So I think a solid mark of a game that has both accessibility and depth to it is you can hand someone the deck. So your deck starts out with 36 cards. They're divided into 3 different houses: Brobnar, Untamed, Dis, so on and so forth.
All alike in dignity.
Yes. So
And there's
and
7 houses total, right?
7 houses
Yeah.
total, yeah. Within the houses, so it's always going to be 3 houses, but the cards within it, there's going to be a variable amount, and that's where the uniqueness comes from. You might have 1 of each card, or you might have 4 of some cards. There's a deck called the Horseman, where there's 1 of each horseman, which is crazy, because for the most part, there isn't a lot of consistency. But you start your deck. There's actually no deck modification because
all ever.
Yeah. What you see is what you get forever. When you start out, the starting player actually draws a hand of 7 cards and plays one, where you usually have 6-card hands, a little bit of beginner stuff. But literally what you do is call out a house. I'm going to call out Brobnar, and I can just play every card from Brobnar. And some of them will have different effects. The effects are very like CCG abilities on it. So there's some like reading comprehension to it, but I can do the action of it. You know, I play the cards, I might discard of that house. What makes the game interesting and strategic, there's no resources. You don't need to worry about lands or getting mana flooded or mana screwed, that kind of thing. I
know what that means.
Yeah. What makes it strategic is choosing which house, because you can only do stuff for one house on a turn.
Right.
So you might have this huge board of like disc creatures, but a whole hand of Brobnar. Do I use this stuff on my board, or do I develop further from my hand? So there's actually a lot of thinking from there. The other really interesting thing about KeyForge compared to other competitive card games is it's a resource management game.
Right.
Yeah, so how do I win?
Yeah, so in order to win, you're gaining amber over the course of the game. At the beginning of your turn, if you have 6 amber, you can forge a key. As soon as you forge 3 keys, then you win the game.
Yeah.
So I don't have to attack you.
Yes.
So the name makes a lot of sense. KeyForge. You have to
Forge
forge
keys.
keys, and
Yes,
that's how you
exactly.
win.
Exactly.
Other than that, though, it's 2-player. It's player versus player, classic dueling card game, right?
Classic dueling without the face hitting,
Mm-hmm.
which is
I like
not like
that.
smacking in the face, which is kind of nice actually.
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, you do
So-
fight creatures and do damage, but you're not attacking, which feels very different.
Yeah.
So you're
can't-
never ever attacking?
Not face. You're never going face.
You're never going.
So you're never attacking your opponent, but
Okay.
your creatures could fight on the battlefield.
Yeah, you can target creatures directly, which is a little different.
I feel like it really takes the style of, resource management board games and mixes it with a TCG feel.
Yeah.
But is also this whole new concept,
Yeah.
which I think is really interesting. And I wonder if we're going to see other games emulate that and see more games like this in the future. But I think a lot of it depends on how well KeyForge does over the course of the year.
I hope
Magic
so.
the
Just
Catan.
Magic the Catan.
I mean, the production is tricky. I've listened to a few podcasts about Fantasy Flight and how they actually made these things, and just developing the algorithm and the system for a unique game where everything kind of has to work together and needs to have power levels. Like, they put a lot of work into.
Oh, yeah.
So you have your deck here, and you brought a deck for us to open, right?
I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
wait, let's bust. Let's say we bust that open, and we'll look.
my
and this
gosh,
is because this is what it's like. You're gonna sit there, and you're gonna sit down with your friends. You're gonna grab one of these cool.
I like
these
how our pilot
pre-made
turns into
deck.
an unboxing episode.
Yeah.
Hey,
That makes me very happy.
We're here to
It's-
talk
it's
about games, and these are the hot
checking
takes.
all the boxes
Yeah.
for live streaming.
So this is KeyForge, and what's exciting, especially compared to a lot of other trading card games, collectible card games, is this is kind of all you need. This is $10 retail before tax. So you can get this, you and your friend can get this and just be playing the game. The other cool thing about KeyForge is any deck you buy could be the most powerful deck in the world. It could also be the worst deck in the world.
Yeah.
I usually don't pitch it that way when I'm selling it, but it could be the best deck in the world.
That's how you'd sell it to me. If like, oh, this deck might be awful. I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in. Tifa and I
I mean,
played.
this one's weird.
Tifa and I played the Magic Arena streamer event for Ravnica Allegiance,
fun,
and
yeah.
I was like, hang on, I'm gonna build the stupidest deck ever first before we get in there.
That's what I always do in Magic.
Yeah.
Just not on purpose.
It's like, let me see if I can make the dumbest deck. Because I don't care if it loses a bunch of times. That one win is all I need. One
Well,
win,
I'm
and
just
it's-
like, I see a card with a cool picture, and I'm like, ooh, I like unicorns. Everything's a unicorn now.
Yeah.
I came into the stream and showed him how to
Friday.
actually play Magic.
That's yeah. All right.
Nice.
So let's bust this KeyForge deck open. Let's see what we get.
All
I'm
right.
curious, and I'm sure everybody watching. If you are watching, of course, Gen Con is in the chat right now, so you can chat with Gen Con.
Personally.
Questions, comments.
Yeah, questions, comments.
If you're not
Goals.
getting through, we have Gen Con's phone number, and you can call him or text him.
It's appearing on the bottom of your screen. Maybe.
So
It's
each
not.
deck has its own name, right?
Yes, and we shall see.
The heroes.
So this, like, the
The-
first
The
thing you
archi-
see when you open is the name of the deck.
Yes.
All right. Oh, I'm excited.
It's like, I get all Steve.
I mean, it could be anything from Steve or sometimes Steve. They like quotation marks. Or like,
I do too, especially when I'm talking to Steve. It
yeah.
confuses me.
or like Rufus, the Stevenator of hijinks.
Nice.
And it's all
That-
like in this arc above the
That is
the
like this
actual-
close to what my actual high school nickname was.
All right, let's see what we get. I'm excited.
All right, and this is also exciting because this thing is flying off the shelves. It's
I know.
actually been a little tricky to get a hold of. So like, if you see these on the shelves, you should like snatch them up.
Is this, did
is
you yank a retail copy from Mox? You were like, hey, I'm gonna borrow
Yeah.
this for the show, guys. Then you're gonna come back and be like, by the way, I owe you guys $10.
No, I've
She
been
gets an employee discount, I'm pretty sure. It wouldn't be 10.
I've been squirreling these things away because I just
okay.
like, because you never know when you might need to do a seal. Just like
Right,
slam
yeah.
down 2 decks, be like, we're doing a seal now.
Yeah, I
It's
can
just
see
a
that.
KeyForge squirrel
Thanks.
trying to get a KeyForge. No.
Yeah. Got a nice little wrapping here. So you see, I don't know how well this is going to show up on the camera, but each deck is marked. So it not only has the name, and this one, I don't know if you...
Trader
Zyla
Everbolt.
I love it.
So that's a good one. Feels very...
Zyla's a great name.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Each one has, in addition to the name, it's got its own unique art. So you will be able to see, too. It's not just you have to look closely at the name. You can look at the picture, too, and see, like, does this belong to this deck? So the houses for this one are Dis, Untamed, and Shadows. Do you want to go a little bit into the houses?
Go
right
for-
now?
yeah,
I'm
go
gonna,
for
like,
it.
You
deep
should,
dive
you should
to
talk
it.
about all of them individually
Oh my gosh,
for
that-
20 minutes apiece. There's 7,
might-
right?
There's 7, yes. So, yeah. That'd take a little time.
Do you want to hear? Why don't you talk about the houses? We'll give these because there's a better shot, a closer shot up of Tifa, so she can hold the cards up.
Ooh, yes.
And I just want to hold one.
If you, how about Way of the Bear? How does that feel?
That sounds right up my
Niffle
alley.
Ape. We got some Niffle Apes in here, which are pretty good. So you can keep track of those Niffle Apes.
Niffle apes.
So the nice thing
hold
about the
them up.
houses, too, is they each have a little bit of a flavor and play style to them. So if you do play Magic, it's not... They don't map directly to the mana colors in Magic, but they each, if you see a house, you can kind of have a rough sense of what's going to happen in there. So Dis is very much destruction. It's about demons and plague and pestilence. So for my favorite deck
You always
that I
have to have
here,
like the evil undead faction.
Oh my gosh, yes.
In whatever thing you have.
oh, as far as the flavor of KeyForge goes, it's very much like one of each. So everything for like beasts, elves, the space elves in there, demons, paladins, like they've
but
got a
kind
little
of
bit of everything.
kind of the standard array as far as
Yeah, oh,
fantasy
yeah.
stuff goes. It's like
Just-
This is adorable.
Magic.
You just have to.
Shadow Self.
Shadow
yes.
Self. So cute.
I mean, if you're going over adorable cards, you might want to show off that Fuzzy Grown, which is actually categorically the cutest card in KeyForge. Yeah,
here.
so Destruction, Board Wipes. Shadows is very kind of sneaky, thiefy, you got elusive creatures kind of trying to like edge around. And then Untamed, unsurprisingly, is just like beasts, like big creatures, lots of fighting, and
Sounds like my
aggro.
style.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how I got
Untamed,
too.
yeah. Wild. Yeah. So that's our KeyForge deck,
Alright.
maybe the official Gen Con TV stream.
There
KeyForge
you
deck.
go. And
It's not just a KeyForge deck.
Deck.
It's Trader Zyla Starbolt, right? Or
Trader-
yeah, close enough.
It's my
Ever-
KeyForge deck.
that's true,
This
yeah.
one, like this is mine. There's no other in the world like it.
So that's Fantasy Flight Games. Going to be having their KeyForge celebration later this year. Speaking of Fantasy Flight Games, they just signed a 3-year co-sponsorship agreement with Gen Con.
And that almost sounded like planned segue. That was
Yeah.
awesome.
Right?
Speaking of which,
Speaking of which, so that's cool. I know we don't have much other details than that other than we just wanted to shout that out.
yeah,
But,
and Gen
but-
Con.
but what does that mean for Gen Con? And what does that mean for Fantasy Flight?
well, I think
That
for
they're bros?
they're
They totally are. I've been going to Gen Con since 2006.
Or
This
sisses.
is not as great term.
Yeah, I've been going
but
since
yeah.
2006, and you can't miss the Fantasy Flight guys.
Yeah,
They're
right.
everywhere.
Yeah.
They're pervasive. Does that happen? Is it even more now? Is it just going to be black bowling shirts for as far as the eye can
Everywhere,
see?
there it
We
is.
don't know.
Well, just the integration of Fantasy Flight with the community, and also with conventions, local game stores, and it's smart. I mean, this is their bread and butter. Like this is
Right.
what
Yeah.
keeps them alive. Is
So
this
then maybe
tight
all
integration.
of these Q4 things are all going to happen the same
Yeah.
weekend,
You know,
and
if I
that's
was-
Gen Con
Gen
weekend.
Con
Which is everything.
speculation.
If I was
Just
looking at this
speculation.
from the outside, I would say that Fantasy Flight Games is poised to make a pretty big move. I mean, not only are they doing this 3-year sponsorship with like the biggest game convention in the world.
Yeah.
But they're also releasing all of this organized play all in the
Yeah.
same year, way more than anybody else is right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think they're poised to make some big moves in the next year.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Well, and Gen Con's open now.
Yeah.
Badge registration.
Yeah.
Oh, get them while they're hot.
Yeah.
Well, it did sell out in 2017, 2018, so
Yeah.
they're going to need to get them badges right now. In fact, Gen Con will probably post a link in the chat to ensure that you guys can get your stuff there.
They're like, will we?
Housing, yeah, well, they're
And
gonna
that
they're
means-
gonna now.
If you
Good
can get
idea.
badges now, that means housing registration is happening soon.
Yep, or it'll begin on the 27th, so you need a badge before you can do housing registration. And again, also get there early,
Yes.
because I know I'm going to see it when it
Yep.
happens. I'm going to see my Twitter timeline be flooded with people being like, I forgot to get my housing. Who's got a room for me?
Every
Yeah.
time.
Where can I stay?
Every year
Every
it's
year.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, the big thing about that is the queue, right? Because if you do get your badge beforehand, then you're going to get into the housing queue, and the better number you have on that, the earlier you get to make your
Yeah.
housing
And if you
selection.
don't make that housing queue, you're not staying downtown this
No,
year.
Yeah, right.
It's just not happening.
That's how it works. Also, if you want to run an event at Gen Con, event submission is also now open. You think the show is presented by Gen Con or something? on,
think that.
on Gen Con's channel. Who would have thought?
Yeah, well, I think the really exciting thing about events is the breadth.
Yeah, you
Oh,
can
there's
do
so-
anything.
there's
You can
so
do
many.
anything.
Yeah.
I put on an improv show for 1,000 people every year, usually twice. So
Nice.
Yeah.
it's
I made puppets.
Oh,
Phil and I
wow.
made food puppets. So he made a hamburger because he loves hamburgers. I made a taco because I love tacos. And then we got engaged at Gen Con last year.
Yeah.
So we actually had little pictures with the puppets we made at the Gen Con event with the engagement ring.
It's adorable.
That's so
Yeah.
cute.
Are the
Pretty
are the
cute.
hamburger and the taco engaged as well?
Yes. Well, they might be married at this point. I don't know yet. They might have
Is it a
eloped.
common law? Like they've just
Yeah.
been they're hand fast?
their parents just don't understand them.
The important
I would
thing,
love.
The important thing to note, though, is that every event that happens at Gen Con is part of this event thing. So
Yeah.
it's not like a lot of things. It's like, oh, you submit a talk and there's selections, and it's like, no, everything happens this way. So if you want to see something really cool at Gen Con, it's like, be the change. You be
Right.
the person who makes that stuff happen.
You can make hamburger and taco puppets and get engaged. Make
Yeah.
that your event.
Yeah,
Be like,
people
I-
getting engaged at Gen Con. Oh my god,
There's
that would be
lots
pretty
of
sweet.
events you can do at Gen Con if you can't get tickets for Gamers Live.
You can
Yeah,
get married
get
at
married
Gen
at
Con.
Gen
That's
Con.
true. Derek is
I got married at ZoeCon last year. That was pretty cool.
Oh, nice.
You know what, Derek? I'm also licensed to marry folks. That's where I'm gonna do an event.
Wedding chapel.
Yeah, Derek and I are gonna do,
Yeah,
but we're gonna do like
actually, so am
a
I.
very fast. All three of us.
Yeah,
what we'll
you
do?
come through.
It'll
Speed
be-
weddings,
yeah,
speed
just
weddings.
speed weddings. You come in. Do you? Done. Next. Let's go.
Yeah.
Sign the
I usually have
papers.
to charge double if I'm doing it in the luster dress from the Gamers,
I love
which
it.
is $3 instead of the $1.50 I usually charge to marry people.
That's a good rate.
It
man.
is. It is.
All right,
Yeah.
all right,
If
we're
you're
get-
looking to
we're-
tie the knot, I'm your guy.
We're running wild with all
Yeah.
this. We're on.
Rein us in.
Let's talk about. I want to rein us in. We're gonna pull it back. Let's talk about restoration games.
Yes.
We've talked about Fireball Island. I actually got to see it. I was at OrcaCon this past weekend, and I got to see it live. For those of you that don't know, Restoration Games is trying to take forgotten classics
Yeah, like
from
isn't
the
Fireball
bygone era.
Island a board game from the 80s?
Yeah.
It is, and
Yeah.
they were like, the way I joke with this to people, I was like, it's kind of like the new trend of video games. We're like, this is Fireball Island HD. It's like the
Yes.
remastered. It's
Remastered.
the new hotness. It's like we're gonna take these old classic games and we're gonna do it. It was massive on Kickstarter. It was made a huge splash on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
I saw people playing it this weekend at OrcaCon, and I was like, wow, that does look gorgeous. They just announced their new game, Conspiracy,
Which is also an old game.
which
Yeah.
is also an
From the
old game.
70s, I
And
believe.
it's like a
I'm sensing a
noir-
pattern with these guys too.
It's like a noir spy game.
Restoration. It's in the title.
Oh, what? That's so clever.
Well, I think an important thing you mentioned the HG aspect, and it's not just remastered, is in tweaking the picture or the colors or the art from a game design perspective. They're really taking a lot of these old mechanics and giving them new life.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the most exciting things about board game design is just how it continually evolves, and
yeah.
we learn a lot. Like every year, we're like, oh, this doesn't feel great for players, or this is kind of like an older style that's doesn't work as well with modern techniques. So
Right.
they're taking the games and not just putting a fresh coat of paint on them, but
I always
making
thought-
them bigger and better than ever.
I always thought modern techniques with board gaming was just, how many cardboard tokens can we fit on this sheet.
If you don't spend at
It's-
least an hour and a half punching out
Yeah.
things,
Then it's
your game's
not- then it's
you're
not
a
a
good
real
game.
There's
Well,
absolutely an optimization for that.
I think people also, at this point in the gaming industry, realize it's important that there is a lower barrier to entry
Yes,
for
accessibility,
games.
yeah.
So like a rule book needs to be understood when you first open it and not take, hours of reading it like a novel.
We all have that friend where it's like, I got this new game. Here's the rule book. Meet me next week and tell me how to play it.
Yeah.
Question for the panel, because I'm throwing this out there. We're
Yes.
doing this live.
All right.
If you can bring back an old game and have it remastered, redone, what game would you bring?
Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
They still make that, but you would how would you update it?
How would I update it? I would just make everything bigger.
Oh, I like it.
I would make everything bigger and have big handles.
So it's
like life size?
Life
like
size,
full
yeah.
size?
So you want Pacific Rim? You just hop into the
No,
Jagger.
I
and
don't want
just-
Pacific Rim. Those things are 47 stories tall.
That might be a little
I just
large.
want robot torsos with big robot arms
Yeah.
on big metal posts punching the crap out of each other.
And it's like you actually have to
Yeah.
get in a mech.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
It's like an
Just
old
roll
school
off
It
stick
camera.
serves,
shift.
it serves
I
no
do, yeah.
purpose
Like-
other than like the kind of ride you would put outside of a Kmart to keep your kids quiet.
Yeah.
Like ride the horse. Rock'em Sock'em the robot,
yeah.
Timmy.
I just want a mech now
Yeah.
that fights with other
I
people.
always just want a mech.
I gave this no thought because we are doing this live, but I know instantly what I would want to have.
What was
it?
And that would be Mousetrap.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love
That's a good
Mousetrap.
answer.
That was always the one, especially as a kid, you were like setting it up, doing the things.
I never even played the game.
Yeah,
I
but
just
how do you
set it
play
up.
the game?
Yeah.
So
Just tell me how you play the game.
You make the thing, the traps,
And there's cheese.
and stuff happens, and
Right.
then the trap activates.
But
maybe.
really, yeah, the whole game is you build the trap, right?
Yes.
It would, and
mostly.
the best part is like it'd be updated, so like instead it'd be like a Roomba. The Roomba catches the mouse, and you're like, oh, you're stuck now.
Well, I think like a core part of the gameplay was the machine not going off. Because that would be the thing. The mouse, your opponent's mouse would get there, you'd do all the stuff, you'd see all the thing, and then inevitably it would just like the marble would fall off.
Yeah, the diver would go into the tub and nothing would stop,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the cage would stop halfway down.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, you're stuck now.
Which
Tifa?
is kind of cool, but yeah.
So you're having no warning. The best one I can come up with is careers.
What is that?
yeah. That's a game you and your parents used to
Yeah,
play.
so I grew up on like old classic board games. And one careers was really interesting where you were like literally going around the board to different like career paths and it'd be like, oh, you're like getting a degree in business and there'd be like different squares that you land on and it's like, oh, you scored an A on your test or like I can't remember exactly.
I feel
but
like it wasn't
it
like
was
an
like
RPG element where like you filled out like you were like
Yeah.
your life and love was great but your career wasn't.
yeah,
like, your
and
career
there's like you're supposed
Oh
to
no,
get like
I'm
happiness.
playing this game right now.
There was like happiness, wealth, and fame, I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
And like
okay.
happiness was like love related, or there's like different things that affected. But I think like that would be a really fun game to sort of like bring and revolutionize into the new tabletop
Yeah.
gaming world.
I want to be able to play Mystery Date on my phone.
so that was gonna be
it's
one of
called
mine.
Tinder.
Tinder, yeah.
No, my wife wouldn't like that.
They're like, no, this is the board game version. It's okay. It's
No,
not
it's
real
cool.
people.
Swiping. Okay, actually, somebody might be coming over, honey. You mind hiding in the closet?
So my thoughts, I immediately went to Mystery Date. There's a new, modern, updated version because that'd be
Yeah.
really funny to see how it is, well, especially with how everything is changing right now.
It would need to be LGBTQ friendly.
That's
Yes.
exactly
Yeah.
why. Like I would love to see how that would change. Mall Madness, which is a game where you just
know
went through
this
it.
one.
That's a great game.
Did
You
you,
went
have
through the-
credit card in there?
You
Didn't
did have a
Yes.
credit card.
teach children how to steal
And you
their
had the little
parents'
credit card
cards
machine.
and-
Yep, and it had
Like
the
the old
swiper.
school kind with the on it. Yeah.
Yep. But then it would just be
Money
like
is free.
it's like you can go to the mall or you can shop at Amazon. Like you get to,
Yeah, and your player's moving around, but here your player's just like sitting in a computer chair, just like
Or somebody on their phone.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just on their phone. But those are the two that I
Like your
immediately thought
hygiene
of.
meter goes down the longer you decide not
So,
to go
yeah.
to the mall.
So the restoration games, get on that. They'll be coming to Kickstarter.
yeah, such great ideas.
such
over
great
here.
ideas.
Yeah.
Speaking of
Kickstarter.
Speaking of Kickstarter, exactly. Speaking
What
of Kickstarter,
did you just do?
Tifa, you
Segues for
wanna-
days
Segues for
here.
days.
So Kickstarter, tabletop games did remarkably well in 2018. Video games were actually on the decline. So let's talk about that. Like, why do we think,
I don't even know. Back in my day, Kickstarter was just used for independent films and potato salad.
That is a
Luckily,
deep
we
cut.
were on the forefront of that,
Right.
and
Yeah.
we have a great fan base because of it. But I love the way it's been gravitating towards games the last couple of years because I need somewhere to spend all of my money,
Yeah.
and I do that by supporting board games that I'll never play.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of it's really interesting, and I think it's in lockstep with the way the Kickstarter platform has evolved. So back in the day, like when I did my first Kickstarter, you know, I didn't have my thing done, and I barely had art, you know, and I had a little description up there, and yeah, it was mostly funded by friends and family,
Right.
but you could still do that.
Yeah.
Nowadays,
You got to have a
can't.
product ahead of time now.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. So I'm working on a Kickstarter for my novel, and it's so intense how much money I've had to spend
Oh, yeah.
before I even get to the Kickstarter point, and it's almost like the Kickstarter's just going to pay me back.
A lot of the problem is there's a lot of these campaigns over the last few years that have failed.
Oh, yeah.
Or they have succeeded, and these people haven't gotten their product.
Oh yeah.
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 And I'm not. I mean, I've been involved peripherally with a couple of those.
Yeah.
And people don't forgive and forget easily when
No,
they've
they
been,
do
when they've been
not.
screwed
Not at
over
all.
by a Kickstarter.
The world's thinnest watch.
Oh yeah.
Never happened.
I'm
So-
fairly certain that there are a number of Kickstarters I have backed that I don't have product for.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. No. And there are a few out there, and people are upset about it. Really.
Yeah.
And so and because of that, you now basically have to have
the.
it's not a finished product, but you need to have your concept art. You need to have your
Yeah.
rules set down.
Yep.
You need to have your design down well before your
Yeah.
Kickstarter ever even starts, and with a hope of getting off the
So-
ground, unless you have name recognition out the yin yang.
Well, and you also
Exactly.
have to be very careful with budgeting and make sure you're really accounting for every single thing, or you're going to end up losing money in the long run.
I've been very lucky in that we at Zoe have like one of the best budgeting teams ever. You
Nice.
know, when we're making movies for well under $1 million, I feel like,
Nice.
okay, we know where every cent is going. We know
Yeah.
exactly how much goes back to the consumer. We've got all of our backer kit stuff set up ahead of time. Know your reward levels. If you're going to start
Yeah.
a Kickstarter, this is great. Always know your reward levels
Yeah.
and what comes with those. What incentives do you have?
Yeah.
And it's really just an algorithm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's become more and more of an algorithm as Kickstarter has gone on.
Well, and it's become, I mean, switching back into talking about tabletop specifically, I think it's a really great place for that because tabletop games are so expensive to make. The components, I mean, shipping a board game, like that's kind of expensive.
Yeah.
But even publishers are now using Kickstarter,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
when it started, I mean, that wasn't the point of Kickstarter originally.
it's still not.
But well, and I mean that comes with good and bad because part of my concern with Kickstarter is that it's a flooded market now, and only so many, like less things are going to be successful because there are so many board games on Kickstarter.
And here's what I think is contributing to the sort of, I don't want to say the decline of video games, because
Yeah.
there's still video games that are getting funded, but there's a difference in, and you game designers, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I come from a video game background, and I've seen people launch Kickstarter and fail because they ask for too much money. And the cost between they're asking for money to help finish a game, which is going to be the same cost no matter how many backers you get.
Right, because
Yeah.
the
With-
video game you either make it or you don't. Like
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
With
yeah.
a board game, if you can, I feel like it's scalable. It's like, oh, we got more backers, which means we can now produce more
Yeah.
games.
Yep.
And the other problem I've noticed is unless you have that recognition, like Toe Jam and Earl is a great example. Everyone remembers Toe Jam and Earl. Everybody loves Toe Jam and Earl. They're like, we're gonna be on Kickstarter. That's all. You didn't even care how bad the game is. Just like, I'm in Toe Jam and Earl. Like, let's
Take
do
my
this.
money.
Yeah, exactly.
Make
It's like,
it
oh, you guys are making a new game that's going to be not the third one. This is awesome. Let's do this. And I think that's where a lot of the declining is coming from. Is people are not asking for too much money to make a video game, or they don't have the following enough to try to get that. You need sort of that. You either need to get that following, or you need to go viral and have like
And
a
have
really
a great game design
Well,
that everybody
and-
wants to see.
And with a board game, talking about how people want to see an almost finished product when the Kickstarter launches, it's
Yeah.
a lot easier to show that with a physical product.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're talking about things being almost done. People, and like several of my friends have recently had very successful board game Kickstarters, and they have the game done. Like literally done looking prototype copies
Right.
that they ship out for reviews before, like a month or
Yeah.
more before
Yeah.
the Kickstarter. So the game is done.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, in a lot of
reviewed
these cases,
before they
and
even put the
reviewed.
Kickstarter up.
Yeah, before the Kickstarter goes up. So like
Yep.
in this sort of a world where you can have that level of trust, it's like the game is done, unless you super mess up with some fulfillment in some ways, like it's going to
But it
happen.
happens.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Although there is the flip side of these, some of the minis games coming out. There's been a few kerfluffles on Kickstarter with people putting up these like super exciting, cheap, tons of minis games. So like they're kind of undercutting the price of some of the more successful ones, and the campaign's unraveling because they're seeing that like, oh, hey, like your rule book is copied from here, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
hey, can you actually produce this and stuff?
wow.
So, but they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars because people love the minis games.
Right.
So there's definitely little, for the most, like on one side you have these super finished ones, and you do still have a little bit of the dream maker like hype aspect in the
Right.
board game Kickstarter.
You know who's not struggling with their minis production?
Oh, tell me.
It's Games Workshop.
Oh wow!
Games
When
Workshop.
have they ever?
Well, they're sort of like on the it's like a bounce back, right? Like
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
you know there's like we talk about markets are being flooded. There's so many mini games out there, but Games Workshop has seen an increase in sales over the last year, which I think is sort of really important.
Well, they did a huge brand shift in 2018. And I think it even started at like the end of 2017. But they had like the 4th edition of their role-playing game. Their new TCG, I think, came out sometime last year. And they had like a new starter box
Yes.
within the last couple years. So they've been working strongly at like just making their brand to that next level.
So what was the brand shift about?
Well, I think like Games Workshop has a very fascinating history. Like even going back to the, I want to say 90s with like the
I
Games
think late
Workshop.
80s actually is
Okay.
when
They've been around a long time.
Games
Yeah.
Workshop store in every mall. You know,
Oh,
back
yeah,
when I was
yeah.
a kid, like seeing that there, and it was its own world. So it was very much this kind of like, wow, just, but it was there in physical space, in a place people could go to and kind of see it. And then like that was the thing for a while, and
Yeah.
then that started to decline. I don't know if it's really such a physical retail thing. In fact, I think they're working more with local game stores.
They are.
Because like, at least for Mox, you know, we actually can sell the stuff at a discount from what you can get online. So they're very supportive of the local game stores. And I think it's a lot, I don't know, I think someone just woke up and said like, we can make a lot of money off this, and like we can listen to our fans. Like we have a rabid, like
their fan base,
incredibly
yeah.
rabid, like dedicated, amazing fan base.
I actually like that you used the word rabbit.
Is it too? Well, this stuff that like people come in, like the grots and the squigs, like super cool Moon Clan stuff is coming out now, and I mean even as like me just starting to dip my toes into some of these minis games, I want these things
Yeah.
because it's like they have little snails where the snail is like in a skull, and that's just like on the base of the mini.
Yeah.
So they have like really cool looking stuff, but we have people coming into the board game store and just like signing up on the request list for like 15 items, you know, and these
Yeah.
things are going to come in and they're going to come back to the store. They're not even getting these
Wow.
things, waiting
So-
to get them shipped.
Yeah, I've always been so fascinated with Games Workshop because when I was a kid, they were the kind of gaming you did when you grew up, as
Yes.
far as
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
could
Right.
see.
Yeah.
Like all the old guys hung out in the Warhammer area.
Yeah.
You know, and I felt like it was a club that I wasn't allowed in because I was poor. You know,
Yeah.
the stuff is a higher price
Yeah.
point to break into the game. You need a bit of an investment.
Well, and I'm not a minis player at all, which is why I don't, can't really answer the like what they changed. But I was in distribution last year, and I just know it was like a big push of like, they're like updating
Well,
what they're
yeah,
doing.
what I've noticed now is just in this last couple of years is that more younger, diverse people are beginning to
Yeah.
play these
I think
minis
that's
games.
what they're going for is
Yeah.
like it for it to be more accessible for people to get into the
Yeah,
game.
When you talk about accessibility, Kill Team. I mean, so this product where they make it like they have the starter set, they have
Right.
everything you need. It's a lot cheaper than getting to the big thing. It's squad based, so you don't need like 2,000 orcs.
Right.
You know, you can
Right.
just like have this thing
Little
and
skirmish battles.
get into it and like build out as you're able to.
Didn't they do a standalone like board game version of Warhammer?
Yeah, they had one that was kind of more of a tactical movement.
I think it
one.
Quest or something like.
think I've got every edition of the role-playing game,
There.
and that's as far as
Right,
it goes.
yeah. But I think that's one of the things that they're sort of working towards.
And the nice thing value-wise is like once you get into a minis game like this, like people are in the store every week, multiple times a week, with their same armies, with their same squads. So it's like it is a little bit of an investment up front.
Right.
But then you just get hours and hours and hours of gameplay perfecting this. And it's the kind of game that is always different when you play it. So you can just play it over and over and over again.
If you our good friend Frequent Beef on the Instagram, I always see he's always showing off his minis that
Oh my
him and his
gosh.
wife are painting.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. Like the detail in these minis are insane. I'm looking at our
Yeah.
notes here and seeing that it's like this is the one thing that like really stood out to me. It was growth was strong in the trade division, which gained around 300 new accounts with retailers, and sales climbed by 26.5% over the last year. That's not a small amount.
Yeah.
Like to
So their
grow-
efforts are like really doing something.
Yeah, Games
Yeah.
Workshop is on the up. Is it BattleTech? No, so I don't care.
There.
Well, now we know. Well, next week we'll dedicate a BattleTech section for you.
Give me some
Yeah, there you
BattleTech.
go.
We'll talk about BattleTech. I don't even know what BattleTech's doing right now. Don't they? It's a video game.
So much more. Yeah,
Are they?
they've got BattleTech's got a lot going on right now.
Well, there you go.
We can
I'm
talk about it another time. We have weeks of it.
Well, and I think part of that, like minis in general, it does speak more to the in-person community aspect and the game store aspect, because you do, for the most part, have to go in to like go to a place, play with your armies, play with your minis, and I think a lot of it, again, we're talking about community stuff, just encouraging people
Yeah.
coming to a space, having those really strong relationships.
I mean, that's the
with
heart of tabletop.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
how they're going to
with the
stay in
stores.
business. Because with internet sales the way that they are, like the fact that these games companies are reaching out to their local distributors and their local retailers to actually make that community happen
Right.
with
Yes.
their
Yeah.
organized play or with their little weekly events. I mean, that's the only way. That's the only way you keep your head above water.
Right.
In
Yeah.
this industry is
Yeah.
really create a community that supports you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking of creating great communities, there's those folks that all gathered to take the rings back. You know what I'm talking about? Lord of the Rings. Talking about Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
and they
what's the Lord of the Rings?
they-
I
they
don't
had the
believe I've ever
quest.
heard of this.
Tifa, what is Lord of the Rings? Tifa, you're a big old Lord of the Rings
I
nerd.
am,
Talk to me.
yeah.
She is. She's a huge nerd for
I'm-
Lord
I
of the
literally
Rings.
have a
I love
tattoo in
it.
Elvish.
Do you really?
Wow, we're gonna have to have a nerd off
I mean,
here.
We're in a great set for
I know. Right?
Yeah, we were
very
set.
Lord of the
I
Rings.
love that we're on a Hobbit-sized set.
Non-infringing. I would like to.
Yeah, it's just Lord of the Rings adjacent.
I said
Sorry,
S.
it's halfling size.
Yeah.
set. Did I say
This
Hobbit?
is, this, is,
out?
this is the Dukes of the Rings, not Lords.
Yeah.
It's the,
Dukes of the bracelets.
Dukes of the bracelets.
That's our
Queens
set.
Barony of the necklace.
Queens of the Necklace actually ties into some things.
Wow.
Wait, what things?
My novel, but it's fine.
Oh, that's
okay.
right.
So I am super excited. There's not a lot of information about the new Lord of the Rings board game. It's a cooperative game and it's app supported,
Yeah.
which that's what there's not a lot of info. What does that mean?
If you can't find somebody to play with, your phone will play with you, just like in real life and every other aspect of your existence.
Well, I wonder if it's kind of like so I know there's a bunch of different apps that support games. Like Seven Wonders was a game that didn't have one, but now it's like, hey, we'll do the math for you.
Yeah,
which I
right.
think is
Yeah.
awesome. There's like One Night Ultimate Werewolf. I think has an app where you just
Yes.
play it while you're playing.
Yeah,
Secret,
has the
Secret Hitler
narration.
will have a narration app for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the happiest introvert of the world if I never have to play with anybody.
well, I
think
think it's
there's a thing for
fascinating that like this like that tabletop, which is so face-to-face dependent, is finding ways to bring technology,
Yes.
which is in every part of our life, and like combine the two together.
Well, look at Drop Mix.
Oh,
Right, like Drop Mix is an
Dropmix
insane
is a great
mishmash.
example.
Have you seen Drop Mix? So Drop Mix is made by
Oh, wait,
Harmonix.
yes, I have.
Yeah,
I played it last year. It's
So
So
Drop Mix
good.
is the game by Harmonix, which is an app-based music game, but you're using playing cards. So
With
you play
RFID.
with
Yeah,
what?
with RFID for
Yeah.
it to have.
So
the,
you play
it
a
reads the
card and
chip.
you can make
Yeah.
mashups. You can fight with one another and create like the most amazing pieces of music via this app. And so I think like you said, the technology weaving in and out of board games. And it's gonna be really interesting for Lord of the Rings: Journeys in Middle Earth to have this board game and an app supported like. Maybe you know what? Maybe we're going the route of the old VCR board games, like Nightmare.
yes.
Oh my gosh!
I still have a VCR because I have Clue, the VCR board game,
Yeah.
and Nightmare.
Like the creepy face.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you just set the timer and
Yeah.
he stops you and it's like, hey, wait, whatever's
There.
happening,
I
stop.
had a cowboy one. What? It was like Showdown or something like that.
That's so
That had a
cool.
VCR.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Well, I would say so. It reminds me a little bit of Gloomhaven. I
Right.
couldn't tell from reading about it if it was necessarily RPG, but it was like RPG adjacent. You do kind of level up your characters. And the thing about playing Gloomhaven, a fantastic game, by the way, just like super fun. Like so much of it was so well done.
It's an RPG style tabletop.
Yeah, 25-pound box.
It's a legacy
That's
board.
literally
Fit
half
in the
my
box
body
or the enormous, just endless content. You got your characters, you got your boxes, you got your cards, you got everything you need there.
Yeah.
But you
It's
also,
in the genre of legacy games, which basically means you're
Yes.
intended to play with the same group of people over and over again.
Oh, see, that's right up my
There.
alley. That's the kind of board game that I do play.
Oh yeah,
Because you have 4 friends, and those are the only people you want to play games with.
there.
I wouldn't call them all friends. I'm married to one of them, and 2
There.
of them are my dogs.
There. Just
But I
knuckle-
always beat them.
knuckle the pieces along the
The
board.
dogs.
There.
Anyway.
With Gloomhaven, though, it also comes with several enormous game books. And you really need a game master to push the game along. Like, you need someone to really deeply know it. And for the combat mechanics, which is one of the things that the app assists with here, is when you actually come to combat, the app will show where the characters, where the enemies are on the board. I assume what attacks they're going to be making. It's all
Right.
done digitally, so you don't need to have a person dedicated to knowing. And that's where a game like that can kind of grind to a halt.
Right.
Because you're in the fantasy, you're in the magic circle, and kind of looking like, oh, and then I do my fireball attack, and it hits everyone in the room. It's like, well, actually. So this person is like behind this table, so that, like they might not have line of sight there, and like I don't know if this one, and then you're paging through the rule book because you want to
Right.
play it right,
Yeah.
you know.
But
it's
having
not-
an app that you could then just like search something up in.
or
Or
just
maybe-
tell you,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
like-
oh, your Hobbit, Bilbo's dead, so sorry.
Spoilers.
Well, it's such a great world for something like that.
Yeah.
Because there's so much content already there.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll see some sort of like AR type of thing where it's like you just hold your camera over there and then it
Yeah.
shows you see the battle happen, like, you know,
Yeah.
in your AR.
Yeah.
I have to say, when I say like, I used to read the books over and over again when I was a kid, and I loved all the movies and stuff, and more stuff.
Did they have movies?
keeps.
I had posters all over my room.
Aragorn.
They
I
keep-
mean,
Oh, yeah.
They're-
Not me, but other people I knew,
They're-
for sure.
They keep coming out with stuff, but when I watched the video for it, and I was like, oh, okay, you know, I'm like into this.
Yeah.
So it's just like they haven't gone through what they could possibly do, and I think they're doing a fresh take on this. which
Yeah.
is-
I would like it if the board game is really just 3 hours of walking.
There.
Yeah, it's like
That's
on,
the first session.
on your turn you can move. And that's
And
it.
cooking. Like walk
Yeah.
for a little bit, sit
Mix
down,
mix.
get your pot.
6
yeah.
meals a day.
The
There's
ti-
a lot of cooking,
The timer
yeah.
stops. It's like, wait, time for second breakfast.
You have,
Yeah.
to, you have to eat. Wait, so it's just basically walking or riding along, and you have to eat all the time. So it's Red Dead
Yeah.
Redemption 2.
That sounds fun.
I would play
I'm in
that
on
game
this.
actually.
Yeah.
That'd be a good
Yeah,
game.
If
that
Lord of the
sounds
Rings was like
fabulous.
that, it's like, oh, you have to make your lambus bread. Okay, I'll hold down A for 20 minutes.
No, very relaxing.
you're all right,
you know,
boy.
very
Yeah.
cooperative. Yeah.
If you were a good GM, you would have food ready.
Yeah.
Like actual food.
Yeah.
Or, yeah. You know about
I am
that,
such a
right?
bad
Like, you're-
GM, I
you're
have
in
to
on the
pay my
cooking
players to show up.
train. You can make
Yeah.
something like this happen.
I could, yeah. I was when I run my games. If there's food involved, I usually make sure that there's food involved, which gets really awkward when we play Vampire the Masquerade, because then I have to go out and
There-
find blood for everyone. I'm like,
Blood.
here you go.
Yeah.
That's when you have a Bloody Mary bar.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not real blood, right?
Or just one big jar of Clamato.
One time, I know we had pomegranate juice and like the little cocktail weenies,
Yeah.
like they were fingers.
For
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was great.
Christian, why don't you take us out?
there.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us this week. This has been TableTakes. My name is Christian. This is Tifa, Mike, and Emma. We're going to be back here hopefully every week until
Forever.
Until they
forever,
kick us out.
until the end of time,
Yeah.
which, from what I hear, could happen at any time. But until then, we will see you next week on TableTakes. Bye-bye.